Uniquely positioned as the female DPS half of the bottom lane lovers duo, Xayah is a self-sufficient and high skill cap AD carry that is characterized by her excellent self-peel and decent amount of CC. Those who know the ins and outs of her feather system will be able to get unique advantages off of it, and she tends to make for an excellent pick in solo queue and very often in pro play, regardless of whether or not she's paired with her partner Rakan. Hello and welcome to this Xayah guide. Here's a quick breakdown of how we'll be going over the video. I'll touch on general concepts of Xayah's purpose as a champion and what success looks like in games that you are doing well on her. We'll then discuss different components of her kit and how we can work better to optimize each one of these. This includes going over different matchups, rune optimizations, ability maxing, your build, drafting, and how to play out each phase of the game. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, we'd really appreciate a like and sub if it helped you out. Moving on to the video. In terms of champion identity, Xayah pretty much fills the same role as most other standard marksmen. Play front to back, maximizing your damage output, and using your peel and CC tools to create space to do your job safely. As much as you want to try to use your tools to try and start fights and lock people down, Xayah's capability at doing so is below average, and it's not how she can thrive best, especially with her ult. Xayah specializes in disjointing enemy engagements and playing front to back, so she wants to play in those conditions as much as possible. Speaking on this from a draft perspective, her self-sufficiency means that she's a relatively blindable champion in terms of matchups. Even in her worst matchups, Xayah can still fare decently well. So in solo queue, I'd say you would generally need to worry about the specific situation in which to pick Xayah over in the matchup. In pro play, it's almost a majority of the same thing, except for the caveat that there are some overall compositions where she might not be able to thrive as well. Any comps that can zone her out and punish Xayah for walking up too much, or any comps with a lot of tanks on them will cause her some problems. Essentially, in exchange for her increased safety as a marksman, Xayah's overall damage output is going to be lower than other AD carries in her class that trade decreased safety for increased output. Now let's take a closer look at Xayah's abilities. Xayah's passive is called Clean Cuts, which causes her basic attacks and abilities to leave behind a feather 1,000 units away from her, traveling in a linear skill shot and dealing damage to all enemies along its path, basically extending her auto attack. These feathers can be used in conjunction with her other abilities to deal bonus damage and brute enemies. Feathers also generally last 6 seconds, and this is an important piece to remember. Xayah will empower her next 3 autos with feathers every time she casts an ability, and in lane, this is pretty much the main tool you'll be using to reach the enemy and harass in a lot of her matchups. This is because Xayah's base range is actually below average at 525, so she will often not be able to contest for CS too easily without leaning on using her tools like her abilities and her passive here. Clean Cuts is often used in lane to get free damage, which in turn procs things like Presence of Mind, that gives her increased mana sustain in early phases. It's also used to create space and threaten damage zones as well, thanks to her other abilities. Clean Cuts is also the cornerstone of her kit, since it is the piece that allows her to set up for abilities like her E. Speaking of which, Xayah's E is called Blade Caller, which allows her to recall all of her feathers, dealing physical damage. Each feather will go in a straight line directly to Xayah, and enemies that are caught in this line will receive damage. Enemies hit by 3 or more feathers at once will be snared for a duration. This ability is where Xayah can get huge punishes on opponents that aren't careful or disrespect her. With this, Xayah can get multi-man snares on enemies that engage on her, and since the feathers all return to her upon using this ability, the farther you are from your feathers, the tighter the angle. Feel free to also reposition your body in order to alter this angle. A common combo as well is to use E flash from side to side in order to quickly reposition it and give the enemy team little time to react. Xayah's Q is called Double Daggers, which sends out 2 daggers that deal physical damage and leave behind feathers at 1100 range. Note that this is slightly longer than the 1000 range that her feathers can travel normally thanks to auto attacks. You generally use this ability in lane to poke enemies as they CS, and also allow yourself to CS on creeps that are otherwise kind of hard to get in. In some metas past, some poke builds have arisen where you end up maxing this ability, and it actually deals a lot of base damage. However, in most situations, Xayah doesn't end up building like this, so you should generally keep this ability as a 1-point wonder and max it last. There's also one combo with Xayah with her Q and E, where if you Q and immediately E, the feathers will just go out and back relatively quickly. If you have one feather already on the ground, the back and forth Q feathers will actually proc the snare on her E weirdly enough. You can use this combo as a subtle way to surprise snare opponents. Otherwise, this ability is also good for just setting up your overall feather zones in order to prepare for a fatter blade call. Xayah's W is called Deadly Plumage, which grants her autos bonus attack speed and move speed. Note that the move speed bonus only applies if you auto a champion. If you happen to be in a game with Rakan, he'll also gain these benefits when you auto a champ. Small pro play tip, this is a big reason why Xayah Rakan is extremely impressive at level 1. Xayah will normally take Q at level 1 in most lanes, but you take W in this lane because the movement speed bonus on both of you generates a very high amount of damage and kill threat, and if Rakan also takes W at level 1, this can potentially burn a flash or even get a kill in the beginning of the game. Finally, Xayah's ultimate ability is called Featherstorm, which makes her untargetable and causes her to fire out a burst of 5 feathers that deal physical damage. This is an extremely powerful and valuable tool, especially for someone in the AD carry position. Being able to consistently have a tool that can disjoint enemy engages is something that is extremely unique to Xayah and honestly forms a lot of her champion identity. Hold it for key moments in enemy engagements and utilize the 5 extra generated feathers from it to empower your blade caller. As of the timing of this video, runes on Xayah are a relatively simple conversation, as there is going to be one main set of runes that you'll rely on pretty much every game. While there's going to be minor variants in which runes specifically you'll run in the tree, Xayah will also have a precision focus page that will always be led by lethal tempo. This is almost exclusively led with an inspiration secondary tree. This guide won't cover the poke Xayah rune and build setup because that's generally a niche build that Riot does not like promoting as part of Xayah's identity, so it's pretty unlikely that this build will ever be in the meta for extended periods of time. With that being said, let's build the rune page. Starting of course with lethal tempo, we'll typically follow up with either presence of mind or overheal in our secondary tree. If you're relatively new to Xayah, I'd say just go presence every game since it'll feel the most intuitive to lane with, and you won't have to be as precise with the management of your mana pool in the early game. In your third tree, Legend Bloodline is most likely just your best install option here, since the sustain is such an important component to your kit. Then follow up with Coup de Grace in the last tree most games, unless the enemy has heavy tanks on their team, in which case I would recommend getting cut down. For Xayah's secondary tree, we run Inspiration with Free Ass Boots and Biscuits. Xayah gets very high effectiveness from both of these since she is reliant on getting 2 items and also has a bit of trouble sustaining through a lot of early game lanes since she comes online in the mid game. The only other tree that could viably help Xayah out in a unique way would potentially be Sorcery with Gathering Storm and Mana Flow Band or Absolute Focus, but the Inspiration tree provides a more well-rounded and more consistent way to scale into the mid game, so it's pretty much best in slot. Xayah's item situation is a pretty chill one. Start off with Longsword and 3 pots most games, unless you need the all-in potential with Doran's Blade, and then lead into a Gale Force Mythic into Navori Quickblade second. If your team otherwise has no tank shred, you can instead opt into Kraken Slayer in order to increase your DPS, but this does increase the risk you need to take in fights since you no longer have the safety or immediate kill threat of the Gale Force active dash. Berserker Greaves are pretty much going to be your boot of choice every time, and from here you've got a few options based on what you need. If you feel like you're getting targeted very heavily in fights, Bloodthirster makes for a good third item. LDR is great for increased tank shred, especially when combined with Cutdown. If you don't have anything in particular that you need, Phantom Dancer is also a good choice as well. During the laning phase, Xayah should focus on farming and poking the enemy laners with her Q. This ability allows her to deal damage from a pretty safe distance and can also leave behind feathers that can be used for her blade caller for longer engagements. It's important to be aware of Xayah's positioning in the lane. She is a squishy champion with low mobility, so it's essential to stay behind minions and avoid getting caught out by enemy abilities. Xayah's W, Deadly Plumage, can be used to help clear waves quickly and poke the enemy laners, but should be used sparingly as it can drain her mana quickly. Xayah's support can also play a significant role in her laning phase. Supports with crowd control abilities such as Leona or Nautilus can help Xayah land her blade caller and set up kills. Alternatively, supports with healing or shielding such as Soraka or Lulu will change the laning dynamic to a much slower one, changing her laning objective more towards survival and scaling towards her 2-item spike, which is also okay with her. Xayah will struggle against champions that are focused on front to back and high overall damage output because this means she will have to play more aggressive than normal in order to answer them since she gets outscaled. There's a catch-22 with this though, because it's hard for her to punish them thanks to her range disadvantage against these champions, so this is generally reliant on her also having support that can supplement this style and play equally aggressively. Against other aggressive lane bullies, Xayah generally does a decent job, because her kit is designed for maximizing enemy engage. This is especially the case since if the enemy AD or support aggresses, this creates better lineups for her blade caller, which can equate into really high trading value and potentially some kills. This conversation continues in the teamfight stage. In teamfights, Xayah should stay behind her teammates and use her basic attacks and abilities to deal damage to the enemy team from a pretty safe distance, which is standard practice for AD carry. It's important to use your Q and W abilities in areas where you can't reach to leave behind feathers and set up for her E to create threat zones. The timing of your ult is also extremely important, because as long as the enemy knows that you have it, the enemy also knows that they will have to deal with that period of invulnerability. In order to maximize this threat duration from you, your ult should generally be used defensively and not to force engagements, meaning that you should hold it as long as possible. Treat it like Xayah's. You want to time it such that you want to disrupt the highest amount of damage from the enemy team as possible. This is similar to Blade Caller. The more feathers that you have on board, the more threat that your E has and the more angles the feathers can come from. It's pretty good to burn it right after your ult as well, because you'll have that extra burst of 5 feathers available to increase its damage. Overall, you'll find that in a lot of games, Xayah is a champ that can really do a lot of the work herself and not have some of the reliance on your team that plagues other AD carries at times. She has the tools to get through lane, can generally have agency with any support pairing or matchup, and has enough tools to succeed in fights on her own. As always, I hope this guide was insightful to you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay fresh.